All right. Wasn't that a cool intro, man? I had such a great time building this refrigerator. I'm super happy with the way it came out. It was a challenge, but I'm super happy with it. We got lights in there and everything. I'm going to show you how I made it in this video. I measure out the sides, the front, the top and the bottom pieces here. So you can see the pieces that I've got cut here. This is just white foam board that I used for the internal shell of the refrigerator. The outside of it later you're going to see is foam, but the inner part, the main part of this refrigerator is the white foam board here that I bought at, I think I might have got this at Michael's or something. I didn't use the dollar store kind here because I need it to be the dense foam. I needed it to be a nice clean piece of foam. And sometimes the kind you get at the dollar store is not very, it's just not that good for a project like this anyway. But I'm using pins, and we're going to hot glue these pieces together and kind of dry fit them and make sure everything lines up here. I'm going to flip it over and just going to kind of get a feel of my edges and make sure I glued everything correctly and make sure my main measurement for the opening is the same at the top and bottom. I scaled this off of a neck adjacent figure, and so it's really kind of scaled not precisely, just by my eyeball, by holding the adjacent figure up to it. We're doing a little light cleanup sanding here to knock down a few edges and just kind of smooth it out overall, because if there's an off edge or you've got some high spots, then later my thinking is it's just going to compound problems if they arise. So here I'm just kind of rocking it back and forth on a flat level surface to make sure that it's pretty flush in the front. I don't want one side out higher than the other, and so we just use a little light sanding block here and knock down some little problem areas and get it all as flush and straight as I can get it. But man, this was really, really fun. Here I've got the hot wire cutter. My thinking is I wanted to take a piece of foam, one entire piece of foam, cut it thin enough that it would wrap around the entire shell of the fridge to give me the nice rounded corners on the top. And so that's what I did here with the Proxxon cutter. You can see to the left there's a strip of foam that I just cut really thinly on the hot wire cutter. And when I glued it around the edge of the white foam board, I wanted to make sure to leave a lip in the front because there's going to be a door closing into the recess, and so that lip is important right there for me. I had to cut it a couple different times to get the right thickness of foam to make one piece wrap around the white foam box. You can see there it's already glued on the box. Here I'm just putting the inserts in, doing some light sanding and hot glue here. Here's a trick that I use with a piece of foam. Sometimes the hot glue dries and it dries kind of bulky. I didn't want that here, so I used a piece of foam like a squeegee, and I just put hot glue on the piece I wanted to put in, and then I squeegeed it down, and really quickly I put it inside the shell of the fridge. This is just going to reinforce everything inside there and create a place for me to put a face plate on there, which is what I'm cutting here. So it just doubled the thickness of the inside of the refrigerator so that there was enough, mass for me to put a plate on the front to hide those seams. And so that's what I'm doing here with the razor. And then I knocked the edges down with a drum sander bit on my Dremel. I could have did it with an emery board, but that would take too long. So I'm like, well, let me get out the Dremel and feel like I'm doing something big time, right? The only problem with that is if you stay too long in one spot, you're going to get a big divot. And at any rate, so fortunately I didn't do that. But I need to cut the door, the part of the door here. So what I want to do is get out the hot wire cutter again, and I'm cutting down a piece that is going to be large enough to cover the front of the, for the door. And then I'm going to cut that piece. I'm going to stand it on its side, and I'm going to see it covers the whole, door there. And now I need to thin it out because that's just way too big of a door. It's too thick. They built them solid in the 60s, but not like that. So we're going to slice a piece off and make sure that I think, and this is just by my eyeball, what looks good. Make sure that we've got a piece that I think is going to be thin enough. Then I just sort of put it up there and do some light sanding to knock the edges down and round the corners out. And make sure that it's going to, just kind of loosely fit on there nicely, so that when, later I go to actually permanently fix all this stuff together, I don't have any real surprises. Even though I did have a couple little surprises, this is the first time I built a refrigerator. So, it's not like I sat down and sketched out a whole diagram and followed it. I just kind of took this as it came. And you got to be able to adapt and adjust on the fly, right? But it worked out. So here I just put a little low adhesive tacky tape on there just to make sure that everything looked about right. And for scale, once again, I just put Jason up there and made sure that, it looked about right, like it should for height and everything. And it looked good. So here I'm going to create some shelving. And what I did is I went to a store local here, and they have a website too, Tap Plastics, but they sell pieces of plexiglass. And so I bought this, frosted kind of plexiglass, and then I'm cutting it down with the, that tool there just scores it, and then it snaps. But these required a little light sanding on the edges also, and the corners to get them in there and to fit right. So once I did that, we'll just move on to another piece of this good quality white foam board. And this foam board I'm cutting now is going to go on the inside of the door, like the insulation. Later I'm going to peel the paper off of it and stuff, and it's going to look like the insulation of the refrigerator door. And so that's what we're doing. You see some plastic pieces down there? Those are some failed filament PLA 3D prints that I was going to use and make into racks. I didn't like the way the PLA printer did it, so I ultimately ended up creating some different shelving. The ones that you saw with the plexiglass look much better. And so now that we've got the door, that's the inside of the door there. And what I wanted to do is make sure that it fits in that opening. So when I open and close the door, that foam piece goes into the opening without getting stuck or caught on anything. So I have to leave enough space around the edges of the pink foam and make sure that that white foam board is centered in there well, and it's going to fall into that big opening there when you open and close the door. And it did. I just did a little light sanding on it, and kind of, you could see how it just fits in there nicely. So then the other trick is just putting it on the piece of pink foam in the right position. So lots of little things and little challenges and obstacles to overcome. And, there's no book on how to do this stuff, so you kind of make it up and use your brain as you go along. And fortunately, it worked out, and pink foam, man, it's just a great, piece of, it's a great tool to build with. It's just so forgiving, and you can make so many things with it. And here I'm just testing it and making sure everything fits and looks good and it falls flat. I don't want the kind of door that, it doesn't close flush. And so here what I'm doing is I'm taking the X-Acto knife and I'm peeling the paper up. I want to create the effect. There's two reasons I'm doing this. One reason is because I 3D printed a freezer door at the bottom of the ice box, and I need the door to be able to close with that freezer lid that I printed. So I have to knock down a little bit of the height of this, or the thickness of that fridge. And by peeling the paper off and tearing it like I did, it looks like exposed insulation in the refrigerator. So it kind of serves two purposes. You can see right here, I've 3D printed a piece of plastic that says freezer on it, and I need to make sure that it closes flush against that piece of that front door. And so it kind of served two purposes there, and everything closes real nice, and I like the way it looks. So we're going to move on to putting some holes and a few little gouges and some distress on the foam here on the remainder of the door. I just use the tip of an X-Acto knife, and then I create some gouges, and then I pick the gouges clean inside with some tweezers. We're making the sealing, the little seals that go around the edge of the door here, just out of extra white poster board, and just peeled the paper off of that. So this is cool, man. I made I 3D printed that would be like a water tray, that sits at the bottom over the top of the freezer. So like if something, there's, some water, came down or collected on the top of the fridge somewhere, something thawed out or something, nothing to go down onto the freezer, sort of like a water pan. And I created that in Fusion 360. And here's everything painted. I love the color of this insulation on the door, man. That's airbrushed. I airbrushed all that there with yellows and browns, and just looks really cool. Now I'm just gluing the 3D printed freezer door in to position, and then cleaning it, the extra hot glue off of the front so that everything's flush. It needs to be really flush because the door needs to be able to close and not look all cattywampus. So here we're putting the water tray in, the water pan. That's what I call it. There might be another word for it. I don't know, but I made it and I printed it, so I'm going to call it a water pan. Right? At any rate, so we're going to glue that in, and that's going to take up the bottom portion of the refrigerator. So, see, there you go. Once it's glued in, everything fits nicely. The door and everything fits on there good. Now, these aren't the colors, the outside colors I want to stay with, but the inside colors and everything, and the facing on the inside of the refrigerator are colors that I stayed with. But the door and the outer body of the refrigerator, I end up painting, airbrushing white. And you'll see here in a minute how I create rust effect and stuff for the outside of the refrigerator using some Vallejo pigment powders that are really cool. And I've got a video on me doing that, a live stream. I'll try to remember to link it in this video here so that you can watch how I used those and what an awesome tool they are for creating rust. So here's a couple, 3 paints that I used to touch up some areas I thought were in need of touching up. And those are the primary colors that I used on this fridge, with a little bit of green, brown, yellow, green, and some white for dry brushing. But here's the pigment powders. I'm going to put these onto the outside body that I airbrushed with just a white acrylic paint. And we're going to rust it out. Normally, I'd rust it by stippling with a sponge and some different colors and stuff, but this process made it really nice, a lot faster, and I really liked these pigments, and I never used them before until this time right here, and they were super easy to use, and I ended up buying some more of different colors because I just really liked them. And the nice thing about this is the refrigerator texture. When I sanded the foam down, it left a nice tooth on the foam that picked up all this nice pigment powder so that I could just totally rust this thing out, man, and make it look really cool. And I 3D printed the GE logo there. You can see I used a PLA, I used a Anycubic Mono X on that. It's a filament. I used PLA, Hatchbox PLA on there, and I printed out the GE logo. I didn't want to do it with the resin printer because I just didn't want to make all that mess for just that little tiny logo. Anyway, folks, stay tuned to the end, and I'll show some pictures close up of this refrigerator completed. And I appreciate you watching. Like and subscribe. Thanks for all the support. Follow me on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, and check out my website, insightfulimagery.com. You can see like tools and different things that I use when I do the crafting and when I do the photography, and you can see my toy photography gallery. Take care.